Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule in Virtual TrekCon presents the 2023 Star Trek Las Vegas Pre-Con Con, starring Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
Barely got through that. My name is Ryan T. Husk. We have our very special guest today. His name is Ian Spelling. If you don't know him yet, you probably should, and you're about to. How are you, Ian?
Doing okay. How you guys doing?
Awesome. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Can we just jump into it and get started? And if somebody says, that guy looks familiar, but I can't quite place it, what would you guess it was if it's a Star Trek fan?
Star Trek fan? Probably somebody's dad. I don't know the answer to that one. Wow, you got me right there. I mean, I've spent a million years writing about Star Trek, and back in the day, I did a weekly column. Sirach, I spoke to you for that. It was called Inside Trek, and it had a little photo of me. So I have been occasionally recognized from this stupid little photo that ran in whatever, the LA Daily News, the Chicago Tribune, and other papers. And I was an extra a couple of times on Star Trek, but I don't think anybody would actually recognize me on the street.
Well, you've also been on stage in the past, right? Conventions.
Well, if I'm at the convention or I'm at the airport, I have gotten recognized walking around or on the line at Starbucks or whatever, or at the airport going back to New Jersey. I've had people say, "Hey, nice job, great to see you." I actually had somebody ask for my autograph at one of the conventions, which was really weird. I was an extra on an episode of Deep Space, and I was an extra on an episode of Voyager, and somebody actually went and got screen grabs of my very brief appearances with no dialogue. I was an extra, and had me sign them, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, that person's thinking ahead. They're like, what autographs can I collect that are very rare and only a few people would have? That person was thinking ahead.
Yeah, what's that autograph worth? I don't think my wife would pay for it.
I don't know. You never know. It's super rare.
There you go.
Rare.
There he is on Voyager. Check that out.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been a part of Star Trek for over 30 years, right? I mean,
I think it's more than that. I mean, I interviewed Roddenberry for my college newspaper in 1985.
1985. Yeah.
Looking at 38 years.
Yeah, we're coming up on 40 years of you being associated or, in some way connected to Star Trek.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, again, you and I have discussed this, Sirach. I mean, you were with your mom when we did the interview at Bender, Goldman, and Helper's offices.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you were just a little kid, and I think your mom sat in on the interview. The Bender people said Ian can be trusted, but just to be safe, your mom sat in the room to make sure you didn't say anything wrong or that I didn't ask questions that were too adult for you, that kind of a thing. I mean, how old were you? You were a little kid, right?
Yeah.
11 or 12?
Maybe 12 or 13, somewhere in that zone. Yeah. That's 30 years.
We both go way back, and we kind of go way back together a little bit.
Absolutely. So you're still involved, and you're actually a guest at this upcoming Star Trek Las Vegas experience?
I have been moderating the panels, a lot of the panels over the past few years for creation. I believe I will be back this year. I'm expecting it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to word this, guys. I don't know how to word this.
This is what I was alluding to when I was saying if somebody recognized you from a Star Trek convention, it's because you are so good at your craft that several times now, Star Trek conventions and other things have had you moderating panels up on stage with the big people of the world and the famous people. And when was the first time you were asked to moderate at a Star Trek convention?
Well, it was Gary and Adam at Creation,
the big one. STLV.
Who asked me to do it. Well, they kept saying, especially Gary, kept saying to me, Ian, you should do this, you should do this. And Adam would say, Ian, we think you'd be good at this. You really should consider this. And I'm not a public speaker. This was not my jam. And I said no. And then they asked me again, and I said no again. And they asked me a third time, and I kind of knew the 3 strikes and you're out rule. So I said, do me a favor, guys. Let me start on the Roddenberry stage. I'm sorry, the DeForest Kelley stage, the
Mhm.
smaller of the 2 stages at the Rio. And
Right.
let me start with somebody at like on a Sunday morning at 9 a.m. where the crowd won't be that intimidating, and give me somebody I know, that kind of a thing. And so we
Right.
started with guest panels where I had, Jeff Combs and other people who I was really friendly with, that I wasn't too terrified to be in a room with 500 people, right, on a Sunday morning. And then the following year, they said, look, you did a nice job on that. We'd really prefer you to be on the main stage. And I said, okay. And a similar thing, can we do a Sunday morning with somebody I know so it's not too terrifying? Maybe that'll be 1,000 people. And long story short, Anthony Montgomery was the one that they gave me. And, Anthony and I are friends. I emailed him and I said, hey, I'm going to be doing your panel. What do you want to talk about? Do you want to go over the questions? That kind of a thing, so that we're both comfortable. And we had a
Yeah.
great time doing it. And then the following year was 2017. And at that time, I was the editor of StarTrek.com.
Heard of
And
it.
my boss said to me that I want you to do one of the Discovery panels. That was the year that they did several panels for the launch of Discovery.
Right.
And
Right.
so I did the Klingon costumes guys that created the new looks and all of that. And that was in front of 6,000 fans, all of the brass at CBS, the executive producers of the show. A lot was at stake, and it went great. It went great. And
This was
so
in Vegas?
this was
Yeah.
in Vegas. Yeah.
Okay.
And
The
so,
Discovery
I
panel in
remember
Vegas.
that panel.
right. So I was a little terrified, but it went great. And so since then, now I'm comfortable up there. I know what I'm doing. During the pandemic, somebody was supposed to moderate panels with me and Scott Mance, and this other person had to pull out because of COVID. And so they basically ended up giving me a gazillion panels, and I was running like a chicken without a head all over the place, moderating panels, which was exciting, but just exhausting because we didn't know till the very last minute. So I was sitting there writing out questions super fast, and and everything was in flux too because people canceled, people came on, some of them were done remotely, so there was a lot of moving parts for a couple of those conventions. So it's fun. I love doing it now, but boy, was I scared when I started.
Ian, when you're doing a panel and you're moderating, the questions that you choose to ask your guest, are they coming from the perspective of you as a journalist, as a writer, or are they coming from the perspective of what you would think the fans want to know? Like, what mindset are you putting?
It's a great question. It's both. It's honestly both. Part of it is you can anticipate some of the questions that the fans might ask people, especially new fans who are experiencing this for the first time. So realistically speaking, when we open things up to the fans about 2/3 of the way through or halfway through the panel, I don't want to step on anybody's questions that might be asked. So I will ask some specific questions to the people up on the stage that I'm hoping are fan questions that they either would be too scared to ask or don't know to ask, or they want to use their time to say, I'm a big fan. What did this mean to you? That kind of a thing. So I try to ask something different. And a lot of it is journalist questions as well, especially if there's new stuff coming up or there's something specific to talk about. And then I also just try to mix it up and get things that they haven't been asked a million times, including by me, by the way. I mean, in some cases, you've got a job to do, right? So it's a question of trying to come up with good questions that the talent will be interested in answering.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest rule of thumb is never ask a yes/no question.
Smart.
Because you run the risk of getting a yes or a no and no elaboration.
Right. And then along those lines, where do you draw the line on asking personal questions to a guest that you have? The stuff about their personal lives. We just heard, for example, Anson Mount just had a baby, and that would kind of fall in the personal aspect of his life, unless you cross-reference it with him missing days at work or something to that effect. So where do you play into those areas of personal versus more topical related to the Star Trek?
Uh, More or less, if I know I'm going to go personal with somebody, or if I want to go personal with somebody, I may have a few minutes backstage before we go on, and I will ask them if it's okay. I
Hmm.
had that with Patrick Chun from Discovery, where he had
Hmm.
gotten married, and I think he got engaged in Vegas the year before,
He
and then he had just
plays
Okay.
Lieutenant Reese, if I remember
yes,
correctly,
Right.
on
yes.
Discovery.
And so I
Right.
said to him backstage, "Hey, is it okay to ask you about this on stage?" And he said, "Oh, absolutely. You know, it all happened here, so please go ahead."
Right.
I uh, was speaking to Ian Alexander
Mhm.
backstage as well, and said, "Is it okay if we get personal on the trans issues in play, personally for you and with Star Trek?" And they said, "Absolutely, feel free." And then we also got
Right.
into a whole discussion, and Blue Del Barrio was on that panel as well. We got into a discussion about, uh, you know, they, him, her, the pronouns, and whether or
Hmm.
not, how comfortable or not they were when people didn't understand the pronouns.
Mhm.
And that led to an interesting conversation.
Right.
So, again, I do want to get personal where I can. Uh, and sometimes I leave that to the fans to ask those questions, because it gives more of a personal contact between the fan asking the question and the talent answering it. And in
Hmm.
some cases, it's my job to steer the conversation towards Star Trek or towards whatever other projects they've got going on. One of the bigger challenges when you do these panels is some of them can have 8 people on the panel. So if I ask a question and I say, "Okay, each one of you, please answer this,"
That's all
that
the time you have right there.
one question can eat up 10 minutes,
Yeah.
especially if the actors, start to joke or play with each other and it becomes a thing. It snowballs and it's entertaining as hell, but then I have to skip 4 or 5 other questions because I want to open it up to the audience.
Right.
Mhm.
So there's a little bit of a strategy that you have to do. If it's just me and Bob Picardo on stage, we can have at it. We can talk about him presiding over a wedding ceremony. We can talk about his love of science.
Which
We
he
can talk
just
about,
did.
yes, we
Mhm.
can talk about, you name it, anything under the sun with him.
How come nobody's asked me to provide look over a wedding?
Yeah, I did
Yeah, to
already too.
preside over a wedding. You
Are you
did?
ordained?
Yeah,
Are you ordained?
of course.
No, but I can get ordained.
Well,
You
get
know.
ordained, and then we'll
You can
talk.
get ordained online, Sirach, in like 3 minutes. Don't even
Sirach,
worry.
I'll make you a deal, Sirach. If you get
Yeah.
ordained, and somebody
Yes.
between now and Vegas, and if I'm doing your panel, and somebody
Okay.
wants to get married, I will have you do it on stage.
So I
Very
can marry
nice.
somebody. All right. Yeah, because
Well,
Bob Picardo, Denise just did it
yeah, she
recently.
did. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Ian, I've got a question for you. It's burning, okay? It's a burning question, steering directly into the heart of the STLV beast. Number one, when was the first time you ever went to Star Trek Las Vegas? And number two, in general, what is your favorite thing about Star Trek Las Vegas? Just is it seeing new panels or moderating your own? Is it those luxurious rooms at the Rio or the Hilton back in the day? What do you think?
Well, let's see. The first one I believe I went to was in 2011 in Vegas. I did
Okay.
go to the ones that Creation did in Manhattan as a teenager,
Hmm.
and I did go to the ones in Pasadena that they called the Grand Slam. Um,
Hmm.
all of that was before it became official, right? And uh, and then when I was editor of StarTrek.com, we went every year, and I was covering it as the editor, doing news. We would split up the team and go to each panel and then do recaps each night of the events that took place, so that
Okay.
anybody who couldn't make it got a sense of what it was like to be there. And my old boss, Bill, was the guy who was running around taking all the photographs in each room. And then he and I at night would put together the stories, the recaps. So that's the answer to that question. And then what's my favorite part? Well, I always love the Rat Pack show. I think
Yes.
that's always a hoot, and I get a kick out of it.
Yeah.
Seeing Avery Brooks in concert was insane. That was really, really very cool.
hmm
There are, some of the shows that they do, the dinner shows, are really pretty cool. I've never done because I've been too busy working after a day's event, so I've never made it to when they've had the Vegas Philharmonic, the orchestra play.
Oh yeah.
But that was supposed to have been amazing, and I wish I had done that. I enjoy, like just as an example, Shatner is there every year, right? He's kind of the anchor. So
Yes.
that's exciting because he is the face of Star Trek. But I love when they bring out some of the people that you just never really saw. To have Whoopi Goldberg there one year, to have Kirstie Alley there one year, to have Kelsey Grammer there a couple of years back. That's really cool stuff. I saw Joan Collins one year. I thought that was awesome. Harlan Ellison, who almost never did any of this kind of thing, was there one year
Wow.
and signed nonstop autographs for people at whatever booth he was representing, or whatever booth that brought him in. It was they had done a City on the Edge of Forever comic book, a graphic novel, and he sat and signed copies, and you could put anything in front of him. And then finally, they had to say to people, "Okay, can you narrow it down to 2 or 3 items, please?" Because people were walking with 6 or 7 books to be to get autographed by him, which was, and he was cool about it too. I mean, I think he enjoyed the attention, but he was
Yeah.
notorious for not wanting to do conventions for a long time. But they finally got him. Who else was cool? Obviously, they pulled off some cool surprises. Was anything neater than when they had Patrick Stewart
I knew you
come
were gonna
out and
say
announce Picard?
that was
Right?
huge.
Yeah.
Right?
That was big.
I didn't
Yeah.
even know about it. My boss pulled me aside about an hour and a half before and said, "Just so you know, they're sneaking Patrick in through a back entrance, and he's going to announce Picard." I'm like, "Oh, very cool." Our whole team, was able to sit in front and watch this. It was very, very, very cool.
Wow.
So yeah, some of the surprises are really fun. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty major. I forgot that Picard was announced by Patrick Stewart in Vegas.
He said, "I'm
Um,
back." Right? That's what he
Yeah.
said.
But what was interesting with that was, I'm sure the story is that he said, "I want to do this in Vegas, not at San Diego Comic-Con." And, they could have gotten much broader publicity, frankly, by
Mhm.
doing it at Comic-Con. But apparently it was Sir Patrick who said, "Nope, I want to do it in Vegas. Those are the loyal Star Trek fans. Let's go to Vegas and do this as a surprise." And I thought that was
Nice.
really neat. Yeah.
That's special. Ian, so you've met probably almost everybody in this business. You talked about interviewing Gene Roddenberry in 1985. My question for you is, has there been somebody in the Star Trek world that you never got a chance to meet one on one and interview? A DC Fontana, a Rob Bowman. I don't know
And
who it
Ashley
is.
Judd.
Well, I've interviewed Ashley Judd for one of her
Wow.
movies. Rob Bowman, I've spoken to a bunch for Star Trek and for X-Files. Who was the other one you just mentioned?
DC
um,
Fontana, I think, right?
DC
DC
Fontana, and I
Fontana.
spoke on the telephone several times. I interviewed her for StarTrek.com. I would have loved to have met, more or less, it's people who died before I got a chance to meet them.
DeForest Kelly.
Nope, I met DeForest Kelly, and he and I were friendly. I wouldn't say we were buds by any means, but somewhere I've got a great autograph from him that he sent on a yellow sticky. He wrote to Ian, "The real McCoy," and it's a black and white photo of him in a Western. looking very rugged and whatnot. And I remember saying to his assistant years after Dee passed, did he sign his own autographs or did you ghost sign them? She said, no, anything that had Dee Kelly on it that was sent from his house, Dee did it. I might have put it in the envelope for him, but everything he signed on his own. So he had included that and a photo of him as McCoy. Because I had said to him when I interviewed him, and this was near the end, this was in sometime in the 90s, not too long before he passed, where, I said, Dee, I've never gotten your autograph. He said, oh, let me take care of that for you. And sent me those two photos, which was very nice of him. But I'm just trying to think who I never interviewed that I would have liked to. Frank Gorshin was high up on my list, both for Star Trek and for Batman. Never got to interview him. Throw me some of the old names.
The
Vic
old Canadians?
Payback.
Who?
Vic Payback would have been really cool.
I don't know that one.
He was a guest star. Take a look. TOS. Let's see.
Okay, so I think the point is, it's this hard.
Frank Gorshin.
Right, it's this hard for you to find somebody that I can't believe it. I thought you would have rattled off like 20 people, but you have to really think college
like a guest star in one episode. Yeah,
from
like
67.
Yeah, no. I mean, no. Realistically speaking, in college in 1986, I did the junket for Star Trek 4. So right there, I had met all of them. And then before that, I was on the set of Voyage Home when they did the sequence in the Paramount water tank where the bird of prey is in the San Francisco Bay, and you have the lightning machines and Nimoy in the white robe with the headband. And if you look at Star Trek 4, at the end of the movie, there's one blooper. And that's the sequence where Jimmy Doohan falls into the water. Okay? All the other little bits that you see at the end of the movie are actual scenes from the movie. That is the one blooper that's dropped in there, along with everything else on its own, for some strange reason that I don't understand. But basically, he falls in the water when they're all jumping in, and that wasn't planned. That was the day I was there. I saw that happen, which was really cool. And that was the first time, for example, that I met DeForest Kelley. He was there with his wife, and the head guy at the Paramount Publicity introduced me really quickly, and we just shook hands and said hello. I had no idea that I would, end up writing about Star Trek as much as I did at that time. And then, based on my work, I've ended up interviewing all the Next Gen people, all the Deep Space, all the Voyager, all the Enterprise, all the Discovery, and Lower Decks, and on and on. So we do have to kind of dig deep. In fact, even back in the day, Sirach on Deep Space, we did everybody for the New York Times Syndicate, for my weekly Star Trek column, and for the Star Trek magazine. So we then had to go and get Frank Langella. We had to go get any of the major guest stars. Harris Yulin. Oh, there's one I never got.
Oh,
Harris
from
Yulin.
Duet.
Yes, my favorite episode of the show. Okay, never got Harris Yulin. He was one that I wanted to get, and I believe Mr. Yulin is still alive, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
I don't know.
Who's the other one that I didn't get? Oh, Norman Lloyd. Okay, Norman Lloyd lived to 104, 105.
Yeah.
And I asked for an interview, but he wanted an appearance fee for the interview. He's like, if I'm going to go and talk to you, it's the same as sitting down for an interview with some company that's doing a documentary. So he wanted an appearance fee, is basically what it boiled down to. The outlet I was writing for wasn't paying for interviews, so we sadly had to pass, and we never got to interview him. So he's another one.
We've got an update. Harris Yulin is still alive. There is still time, Ian.
There you go. I would love to get Harris Yulin.
Let's bucket list that for you.
on my list. And I'm Roger Carmel is another one, but he died so young. Harry Mudd, the original Harry Mudd.
Yeah,
he died so young that I never got him. But I got to interview all three old Klingons from Blood Oath over the years. Those guys were great, right?
Poor King.
I have a question for you. So we're at the Star Mission Las Vegas, let's say you're on stage hosting a panel, and I bring out a magical guest for you that you've never met before and you've never interviewed. And this person I'm going to name shortly. But this is the question. What question would you ask this person? And the person who I'm going to name is Lucille Ball. If Lucille Ball showed up in Vegas this year while Ian Spelling was on stage, what would be the question you want to know the answer to?
Well, I basically asked her daughter the question. And her daughter is married to Lawrence Luckinbill, who was in Star Trek, and who will be at the event this year, actually. So I'm sure he's going to get similar questions. But I would ask her, what does it mean to her to know that something she greenlit and really supported? Because remember, she basically said okay to this twice, right? What does it mean to her? Forget about the money, forget about everything else, that she helped create an American institution. I'd love to hear the answer to that. She couldn't have known at the time, right? At the time, it was just another Star Trek show, just another television show, right?
Yeah, right.
And it
wasn't a brand. It wasn't an iconic thing, part of the lexicon of society. This was just something she was just throwing away, kind of investing in, taking a chance on.
And if I sat there and I had 20 minutes with her, I would have asked her, how interested would she have been in guest starring on the show?
Oh, yes.
And what would she have liked to have played? I mean, there's all sorts of things that you could do with that. Would love that.
She might have taken Majel's.
What I was thinking
jobs away from Majel.
Was Moogie. She'd make a great Moogie with the way she could contort her voice and do all these funny sounds. And all that. Oh, she'd be awesome.
And she also greenlit Mission Impossible.
Okay.
She also pushed for Mission Impossible. Look where we are now.
I think I heard of that.
Yeah.
I've heard of that.
Yeah. Right? I mean, that was an old television show that ran for 6 or 7 seasons? Something like that.
Yeah.
Right? And my uncle, here's a connection. My uncle directed 4 episodes of Mission Impossible, including 2 with Nimoy in them, because he was one of the co-stars of the show.
Wow, cool.
Oh, wow.
After Martin Landau left and Star Trek had ended, Nimoy joined the cast of Mission Impossible.
Can you enlighten us really quickly? You brushed over it, Ian, but what is Lucille's daughter?
I had tried to get Lucy Arnaz as an interview for StarTrek.com, and she politely passed, but sent me a nice note saying, I'm sure my mom would have been very thrilled by everything that happened with Star Trek. Her husband, who is Lawrence Luckinbill, who I'd love to see at a convention one day, I did interview him for StarTrek.com because he was in Star Trek 5. And he was really interesting, but he didn't get too deeply into the whole my mother-in-law talking about Star Trek type of thing. He said it wasn't a regular dinner conversation that they had. Boy, would I have loved for that to have been a dinner conversation that they had. So we could have gotten real scoop out of him about that from her. But we can all hope, right? Can only wish.
And I guess I know we're close on time here, Ryan. So I'm just going to ask my final question.
Yeah.
Ian, what John Taylor song will you be singing at the karaoke?
Very nice.
Vegas?
Very nice.
I have no idea why.
All right.
You've got a friend. It's got to be you've got.
Oh,
a
you
friend.
said John Taylor. You said John Taylor.
Yeah.
You meant James Taylor.
Oh yes.
John
Yeah,
Taylor
sorry.
was a football player back in the 80s.
And John Taylor's in Duran Duran.
I messed that up.
John
Yeah,
Taylor's in Duran Duran.
I messed that up.
Again.
James
Ask
Taylor.
it again. Ask it
Okay.
again.
Which James Taylor song are you going to be singing in Vegas for karaoke this
Either
upcoming convention?
Shower and Rain or You've Got a Friend. I think that would be the class. You know what? You've Got a Friend, because that could be a sing-along.
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be a
and you can
sing-along.
point to everybody when you say it.
Right? You've got a Star Trek friend. We'll elaborate on the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great one. That's a great one.
Well, everybody at home, if and when you see Ian at Star Trek Las Vegas, aka the 57-year mission presented by Creation Entertainment, say hello to him. Unless he looks like he's focused and getting somewhere. That means he's late to moderating his thing. If you see him like just kind of walking like this, just know that he's got some important business. But if you see him hanging out, roaming the halls, the vendors room, say hello. Tell him he's doing a great job. And we really appreciate all the work you do for the Star Trek community, Ian. And we appreciate you joining us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Always good to see you guys.
It's been a lot of fun. So everybody at home, thank you very much for joining us. Stick around, enjoy more of this. And we'll see you next time on the Star Trek Las Vegas Pre-Con Con.
Yes.
Not